Hey, this is Mike from Run Testers. This is the Garmin Instinct 3 AMOLED, and that means we get another Garmin with a colour screen, and it continues Garmin's trend to add colour screens to other watches in its range. Now, AMOLED displays aside, there are some changes from the Instinct 2 series, and we'll get into what those are exactly. Then myself, Nick and Kieran will let you know what we liked about the Instinct 3, what we didn't like so much about the new Instinct, and then let you know whether the Garmin Instinct 3 AMOLED is a good running watch pick. Okay, so let's give you those key Garmin Instinct 3 details. Let's start with models and price. Like Garmin's Fenix series, you can now pick up the Instinct 3 with Garmin's latest solar charging display technology or with an AMOLED screen. Going AMOLED though will cost you more. There's two case sizes which match these sizes of the Instinct 2, but there are now larger displays in comparison. And while AMOLED does bring colour, it doesn't get you a touchscreen like other Garmin AMOLED watches. Waterproofing remains the same as the Instinct 2, while you're now getting more inbuilt storage across the Instinct 3 models. In terms of new notable features, you're now getting Garmin's latest multi-band GPS technology, and that includes its Sat IQ mode as well. That goes along with Garmin's latest strength training features, a multi-sport tracking mode, and the promise of improved sleep monitoring. There is still no full mapping support. For the AMOLED version, you are now getting a new user interface where the sub-display does live on, along with the ability to access the Connect IQ store from the watch. On the running front, you are now getting access to Garmin's Pace Pro pacing strategies and tap into its grade-adjusted pace metrics. Battery life is up to 18 days in general use or 7 days with the screen on 24/7, with an Expedition GPS mode getting you up to 16 days. Now those are the battery numbers for the AMOLED version and the 45mm version that we tested. You will get more battery life in general if you go for the solar version of the Instinct 3.
Comes to my likes with the Garmin Instinct 3. I'll start with the design. I've not always been the biggest fan of the Instinct design. Like, I can see it has its appeal to lots of people. It's just not really my style. I tend to prefer the slimmer Forerunner or Fenix watches, but I do really like the look of the Neotropic Instinct 3, I have to say. It's a nice colour. It's got a pretty cool design, eye-catching design. I like the look of it, and I do like the addition of AMOLED to the range. You've now got this big range of options in terms of sizes and the screen. Obviously, lots of people, Instinct traditionalists, will prefer the memory and pixel display, but that's still available, and you've now got an AMOLED screen as well, which I do prefer. And while it's not the largest, almost like eye-catching AMOLED display in the Garmin range, it certainly does the job really well. It's nice to look at. It makes the watch a bit nicer to use day in, day out, I find as well. And the design is, for a chunky watch, quite lightweight and everything like that. So although it's not the easiest necessarily to always sleep with, because it's quite a big watch, I sometimes find I have to take it off, but it is a nice design all round, I think. I've also been impressed by the GPS accuracy of the watch. Throughout testing, I've been using it alongside a Fenix 8, Coros Pace Pro, Forerunner 965, and it's always had produced very reliable GPS tracks, very much in line with the other watches there. I did a 22-mile run using the Instinct 3 and the Fenix 8, and I think they ended up 100 meters apart in terms of overall distance on GPS. So yeah, very much in line with those others. All the tracks look really good, so that's in multi-band mode, and you can use the most accurate mode of the Instinct because the battery life's so good, which is the other like I have with the watch. So this is the 45mm AMOLED Instinct 3, which I think must have the shortest battery life of the range, and it still easily lasted me a week of use with the screen always on, running every day using the multi-band mode, doing other activities as well. So that's really good battery life. Obviously that battery life only climbs drastically if you do things like use the race to wake mode, get a larger watch, or look at the memory and pixel watch, which can last forever, I think, in sunny conditions if you're not doing any activities. So yeah, battery life's definitely a strong point of the watch, and I also been really impressed with the design and the GPS accuracy.
I've spent the past 3 weeks or so testing the Garmin Instinct 3 45mm AMOLED rather than the Solar, so that is what I'm commenting on here. And I think there's a lot to like about this fun, compact, more affordable Fenix alternative. If you want rugged details and boosted durability just without the heft of the henchest adventure watches, this might well be in your sights. Definitely one to consider for that if that's your top priority, and for that it is a good watch. I kind of like the G-Shock-esque sort of styling that you've got, and I like that there's a factor choice of different colours, some of them a bit more punchy, some of them a bit more interesting. Speaking of punchy, the punchy smartwatch screen on my AMOLED test model is bright and lively, easy to read. It's a great addition over the Instinct 2X, even though it is a little bit small in terms of the real estate, but that's a trade-off for having a rugged watch that's a shade more comfortable to wear 24/7 than the bigger ones like the Fenix here on my wrist. I wish it had quick fit straps. I much prefer nylon straps, but sadly not. And speaking of customization, I really think that this is one of Garmin's strong points now over the rivals. The ability to customize faces, sports modes, create your own sports modes, tweak all the stat screens that you see, fiddle with your widgets and shortcuts, not to mention create different power modes or customize power modes. It's all a real standout, and you get all of that ability to tweak the Instinct 3, minus the new menu setup that you've got from the new software that landed with the Fenix 8. Didn't really miss it too much though. It's a nice touch on the Fenix. The other positive, battery life is solid in all systems GPS mode with the always on screen off. A 1 hour run for me burned just 1%. In all systems dual frequency max accuracy mode with raise to wake, a 1 hour run burned just 3%. The overnight burn was 1% regardless of the screen settings. Then with the always on screen on, a 1.5 hour run using max accuracy dual frequency mode burned 3 to 4%. A 2.5 hour run in the same settings burned 8%. The average daytime usage with no training with always on switched on was around 6%, and in total I got 9 days of general usage with 7 hours of GPS training and 2 hours of indoor heart rate cardio on a single charge. All things considered, that is a pretty good performance for a compact watch. Now the GPS impressed me too. GPS uplink was snappy, and for reliability in the highest accuracy settings, the Instinct 3's GPS was on par with the Fenix 8. I ran a lot of times with it side by side. It was always within 10%. That margin for error on the overall distance is closer mainly. And when it came down to looking in the traces, it snapped to roads, paths and routes just as well as the Garmin Fenix 8. Had a little struggle in the usual spots like under some underpasses that I ran under roads, all those kind of things, but no more so than the Fenix. And on the whole, I found it nicely reliable. Other things of note, the front-facing torch is a welcome addition, and I only recently learned that you can set that to strobe for some added safety visibility on night runs. There's also good safety features here too with live track and incident detection, though there isn't the siren, which I think is a bit of a miss.
So let's start with the good, and the good definitely starts with the design. Now I know the design of the Instinct isn't going to be for everyone, but I like the fact that Garmin have done something slightly different with the Instinct series in general. You're not going to mistake it for the Forerunner or the Fenix 8. You're not going to get the same level of durability and materials as the Fenix 8, but I think you're going to get enough in here to make it feel like a rugged watch, but also something that's a little bit more playful, a little bit more colourful. That run tracking experience, I think in general has been very good. You know, the big story here, or the big upgrade from the Instinct 2 series, is that addition the kind of multi-band GPS we're seeing kind of rolled out in most of Garmin's watches that can support it. There's that Sat IQ technology as well. The GPS performance has been very good. I've been mainly using it in that max accuracy kind of multi-band GPS mode, and you know, I've been using it against the Fenix 8X, the Garmin Forerunner 965, and it's held up very well. I think looking at the GPS tracked routes, it's all looked pretty solid for me. Probably slightly wobbly in some places, but you know, I would trust the performance of this watch in that kind of top GPS mode, and very much in keeping with other Garmin multi-band GPS watches. The other thing to talk about here is battery life. I think the battery life is very good. Is it the best level of battery life you're going to get on a Garmin watch? No, but I think in terms of giving you know, comfortably a week worth of tracking, whether when you're using it that raise to wake gesture mode. If you use it with the always on display, it's going to be less than that. For me, it's probably around about 5 days. But things like the battery drop off for, you know, day to day when you're not tracking, when you're using that top GPS mode, it's pretty much in keeping with other watches, other Garmin watches that support that multi-band GPS mode. I like the design. I like the fact that GPS performance works really well for me. The general training analysis and metrics around it have worked very well and feel like they can offer good guidance, and that battery life is pretty solid. Given there's an AMOLED display on here as well, it feels like it's in keeping with other AMOLED Garmin watches that don't see a significant drop in battery life. It's still going to give you that kind of Garmin kind of big stamina that we expect with watches that don't have those AMOLED displays. So yeah, those are the kind of key things that stood out for me on a more positive front.
My dislikes start with the heart rate accuracy on the Instinct 3 AMOLED. Like, it hasn't got the latest Garmin Gen 5 sensor. Now, not always the biggest change from generation to generation, but I do think that Gen 5 sensor you get on stuff like the Fenix 8 and the Fenix 7 Pro is a step up in accuracy for Garmin, and it's what I've been using on most of my watches lately, and it is more accurate than the one on the Instinct 3. I've been running in pretty cold conditions, and I've seen quite a lot of errors thrown up throughout my runs when using the Instinct 3's optical heart rate sensor. It's a shame Garmin just couldn't put the latest sensor in. Also rules out some stuff like ECG and stuff like that, I think, but mainly it's the accuracy I'm after, and it's just a less accurate heart rate tracker than other Garmin watches. And this is, a new release. It's not like that sensor is just out either. It's been around for, over a year as well, maybe even 2 years. And I think it could have gone in here to improve that. And instead you've got a fairly iffy heart rate accuracy. I've seen it, be way out of whack compared to other watches and a chest strap during my runs. One thing, I did praise the design of the watch, but I do find the buttons can be a little bit stiff, and there's obviously no touchscreen on the watch. I don't tend to use touchscreens that much, even if they've got them on watches, but sometimes it's handy. I did notice it wasn't there when I was trying to use touchscreen, and the buttons can be a bit stiff, but it's quite a minor one. And then the last one is another thing that Garmin hasn't put on the watch, which is maps. This is an outdoor adventure-focused watch. It hasn't got the storage space. They just opted against that and just not put maps on it, and that is a big loss because not only are there lots of Garmin's in sales now that go around this price that have maps, but also most other brands are now making maps available at this price point. You've got Coros Pace Pro has maps on it, the Polar Vantage M3, the Suunto Race S. This is no longer like a premium feature, but Garmin is still pushing it onto its premium watches, and that's a bit of a shame, especially with a watch like the Instinct with an AMOLED screen now that could really benefit from those maps. So I think that is a really big loss and makes it a lot harder to recommend if you are looking at it as an adventure-focused watch.
So into the bad stuff with the Instinct 3, and I can't say I've had a bad experience with the Instinct. I think it's more to do with, I've been disappointed with some aspects of how Garmin has approached the Instinct. Now, like the Fenix 8, you're getting the option of an AMOLED or a solar charging display. Now, you're paying a premium for the AMOLED, it's costing more money in that solar version. Now, I find it strange that you've got that colour display, but you don't have that touchscreen support, because I think the whole idea about having a colour display is to make Garmin watches feel a little bit more like smartwatches, and the fact that you can't kind of prod and tap on the screen and swipe seems a bit odd for me. I think it kind of limits its experience as a smartwatch. I think it doesn't make the most of the experience of having a colour screen. I think, from a mapping and navigation point of view, and I'll get into a little bit more of that in a minute. Now, I kind of like the sub-display that, the previous Instinct watches had, and, what you do have on the solar charger version. And that's still retained in the user interface, but I don't think it adds anything when you have that, colour screen now. It's not kind of really standing out for me. And I think they could have probably ditched that, and it's not, really present in all of the interface, and give that mapping support, which is lacking here. And, given you can get that kind of full mapping on cheaper watches outside of Garmin's range, it feels weird that it hasn't added it to this watch. I know it's still going to be something that separates two watches, the Fenix and the Instinct, but I think, given that you now have an AMOLED display, it would have made more sense to have it there. So for me, that seems a bit of an odd one. As I said, everything else has been generally fine. I think a lot has hinged around, Garmin's decision and its approach to having a colour screen and what that means for the rest of the experience from a smartwatch, a kind of mapping and navigation experience, and generally just using the watch day to day. So yeah, not a bad watch to use, nothing that's inherently making this a bad experience, but I think it could have been a better experience if Garmin did some things a little bit differently, particularly from a display point of view.
There wasn't a lot that I disliked about the Instinct 3, so this is more a list of gaps and omissions, sacrifices that you're making, sometimes presumably to keep the price down, sometimes because of that smaller sizing, and then sometimes it's not entirely clear why when rival watches offer the features at a similar price. Now, the most notable is the lack of offline and routable maps. I don't tend to rely too much on maps for most of my running, and when I do, I often just reach for my phone. I'm always carrying my phone. But not having it is certainly going to frustrate some people who do like that, particularly considering the Instinct is touted as a rugged sort of adventure watch built for more off-gridding as well as kind of urban running. It's a surprising omission for this kind of watch. You have to wonder if that's done to keep people spending up the chain on pricier watches, perhaps like the Fenix and such like. When you consider the suite of watches at the similar sort of price or cheaper in this area that offer offline maps, it's a real miss here. The Suunto Race S is one that stands out for me, but there are many. Other missing bits include the lack of offline Spotify music. That bothers me more. Music is something I use. It's very handy for runs into remote areas where you don't really want to drain your phone battery or those kind of things. I also noticed the lack of a touchscreen. Again, I'm not a huge user of the touchscreen, but coming from AMOLED watches or other watches, it's something that you'd kind of expect when you see this. I'm also not a huge fan of the flatter buttons here. I get why they don't protrude on kind of adventure watch, but I found them harder to use, particularly with gloves on. And then on the software side, one of the features I really missed was Climb Pro. Again, for hilly, mountainous sort of trail runs and hikes and ultras, it's a cracking tool. One of my favourite things on Garmin. It's great for seeing what's up ahead, where you're at on a climb, what you've got left when the descents are coming. I'd really expect it on this watch as well. I also had some ups and downs with the optical heart rate. It was fine on steady runs, but sometimes struggled when I shifted gears a lot during intervals. It's classic optical stuff, and as ever, if you really care about the fidelity of your heart rate powered insights, you're still going to benefit from using a reliable chest strap.
Verdict, the Instinct 3 is a really good watch. Like, it's a watch that's now, I think, a really attractive option. If you like this design, you know, this look, which is quite different to Garmin's other watches, you now have a really strong sports tracker, you know, to back that up. That's equivalent to the Forerunner and Fenix range in lots of key ways in terms of accuracy of the GPS tracking. Get a lot more training analysis now and that kind of thing on the watch. So it's a really good watch, definitely a good rival to, you know, the mid-range Forerunners, and even, you know, a good cheaper alternative to stuff like the Fenix 8, because you're getting a lot of key features here on this watch at a much lower price point. And it's definitely a really good watch for runners. You know, you've got that accuracy, you've got lots of stats on screen, you've got big battery life. So purely looking at this as a running watch, I think it's the most capable Instinct I've tested for sure. It's the one I've liked using the most as a runner. Price is still fairly high though, especially given that Garmin has missed out some big features here, like the latest heart rate sensor, maps, and, you know, big thing with Garmin always is that there are so many Garmins in sales that are excellent watches that have been out for the last couple of years. Things like the Epix 2, which is, you know, going for such low prices these days. Even the Fenix 7 Pro and the Epix Pro are now in sales down towards this price for the Instinct. So you can pick out really great watches with memory and pixel or AMOLED displays that have maps, and actually that heart rate sensor I've been talking about, you know, at around the same price usually in sales, especially if you wait for big sales events. And it always just makes it harder to recommend new Garmins. It's almost like, you know, you see a Garmin come out, it looks amazing, you wait 6 months, a year, and you get it in the sales kind of thing, rather than going straight for it. And that's the same with the Instinct 3 for sure. And there is some big losses here. Like, not having maps is just not a great decision in my mind. I think they should be on the watch, especially with the target audience it's going after. Lots of nice updates here. I do like that it has the 2 different screen options, and it offers like a cheaper alternative to the Fenix, but the Fenix is offering more in terms of stuff like maps, later sensors, later hardware, and I feel like Garmin could have put that on this watch and hasn't, and that's just a bit of a shame. So that just, you know, undercuts it a little bit, but certainly a watch I enjoyed using throughout testing. An accurate tracker, a good running watch, but there's still some concerns and missing features that undermine it a little, and there might be better watches out there in sales and stuff like that.
Verdict then, and this is a great little watch with an eye-catching design and definitely a potentially more affordable Fenix alternative, and there is a lot to like. Got a punchy smartwatch screen, all the soda skills depending on which one you go for. You've got a good battery life, reliable GPS, a light but durable build. If you throw in a pretty comprehensive suite of health, training, tracking and performance tools, I think the Instinct 3 is a capable, adventure-ready watch in a compact package. However, there are some important omissions that might put you off. If you want the best mapping tools, streaming music, or a touchscreen, you're going to need to look elsewhere. And the lack of offline maps is a big miss here, no getting away from it. If that's important to you and you don't mind a bigger watch, you could look to the older generation Fenix 7 or the Epix models on deals to bag more features, including those missing maps, for a similar price, maybe a little more. If you're not buying for the rugged styling, there are lots of AMOLED options around this price range too. Those that sit outside of the Garmin stable, the Sunto Race S is one compact option, offers similar feature setup but with offline maps. I really like the Sunto Race S Titanium as well. Packs a more premium feel. It's a bit more expensive, get the maps, but I think all round it offers good value for the price. So that's another one to consider. To summarise, very capable watch, perhaps missing a few key things depending on what your priorities are.
So my take on the Garmin Instinct 3, and I'm looking at it from a point of view of what it's like as an upgrade from the Instinct 2 series. Now, the most notable things there being the AMOLED display option, the multiband GPS from a software point of view, a few more strength and indoor training focused modes, so not really outdoor centric features. And then you are also getting, from a smartwatch point of view, the ability to view the Connect IQ store on the watch. Now, it don't seem like a huge amount of things from a software point of view to really say that you need to make that upgrade. I think the big one for me would be the dual band, multi-band GPS support, which is very good here on the Instinct 3. It really depends whether you really are desperate for an AMOLED display, which is going to cost more than the kind of solar version of the Instinct 3. You know, it kind of loses a little bit of the sub-display charm that you get with the Instinct previously, and also the Instinct 3 Solar. And I think having a colour display, not making it touchscreen, not adding mapping, seems like a strange one for me, particularly when you see that cheaper watches are offering that full mapping support, and maybe doesn't match Garmin in all departments, but I think, you know, knowing that you can get that functionality for less money, I think makes it all the kind of more odd that it hasn't been included on the AMOLED version of the Instinct 3. I think you look at it in and around Garmin's range, you know, you have to look at things like the Garmin Epix Pro Gen 2, which you can find for a little bit less around the price. And if you wanted an AMOLED Garmin watch, I think makes full use of that display, gives you a touchscreen display, gives you that full mapping support, then that will be a watch to look at. It's a big jump up to the Fenix 8, which is going to give you a lot more. It's going to give that full mapping and navigation features, the newer kind of Garmin software, kind of a little bit more in terms of battery life as well, but you're going to have to pay for it. It's an absolutely fine watch to use and track your runs. I just think when you look at it from an upgrade point of view from the Instinct 2, it really kind of boils down to whether you want that better GPS performance and that AMOLED display, which you are going to have to spend more on. Okay, so there you have it. That is our take on the Garmin Instinct 3. Now, if you've got any questions about this watch or other watches you want to see it compared to desperately, do let us know in the comments. As always, like and subscribe, hit that little bell to find out about our latest videos, and yeah, see you in the next Run Testers video.